The chandeliers sparkled above the grand hall, every corner filled with wealth and power. Glasses clinked, conversations buzzed, and the air reeked of status. And in the middle of it all stood Clara, the quiet event manager, carrying her clipboard and a soft smile. She blended into the background, the kind of person most of these CEOs wouldn't notice. But when the arrogant Mr. Dalton snapped his fingers and barked, "I don't talk to the staff," the entire room froze. His words cut through the air like a blade, humiliating Clara in front of hundreds of high-profile guests. Snickers followed. To them, she was invisible. Disposable. What Dalton didn't realize, though, was that Clara wasn't just managing the event. She was managing him. And with one calm decision, she would wipe the smirk off his face and change the future of his company in front of everyone watching. The evening unfolded with a glossy perfection only money could buy. Waiters glided silently between tables draped in white linen, offering champagne flutes and delicacies so delicate they barely seemed real. Every conversation was a performance, men in tailored suits comparing deals, women in elegant gowns measuring each other with glances that doubled as challenges. It was a jumble of status symbols and silent battles for dominance. Clara moved quietly through it all, making sure nothing faltered. The microphone was ready, the lights adjusted, the agenda perfectly timed. To the guests, she was invisible. Just the staff. Just the one making sure their glamorous evening ran smoothly. And that's exactly why Dalton felt no hesitation in dismissing her. She approached him politely, her voice calm. "Mr. Dalton, I need just a moment to confirm the details of tomorrow's session." He didn't even look at her. His eyes stayed fixed on the chairman beside him, his lips curling into a smirk. With a sharp wave of his hand, he snapped, "I don't talk to the staff." The words sliced through the air. Conversations faltered, then fell quiet. Heads turned. In a hall filled with the richest, most powerful leaders in the country, Dalton had chosen to humiliate her publicly. A few of his companions chuckled. One raised a brow, enjoying the cruelty of the moment. Others simply looked away, eager not to be caught in the ripple of embarrassment. Clara's cheeks warmed, but she did not flinch. She had seen arrogance before, the kind that thrived on belittling others. She gave a small nod, as though his insult barely grazed her, and turned slightly, continuing her work as if nothing had happened. But the room remembered. The guests watched, the tension simmering like static. Dalton relished it, leaning back in his chair as if he had proven something. His associates leaned in, whispering, laughing under their breath. One of them muttered, just loud enough for Clara to hear, "Imagine thinking she mattered." Clara continued her work, her clipboard steady in her hands. On the surface, she was the perfect picture of humility, silent, efficient, unbothered. But beneath that calm exterior, something sharpened. She didn't need to defend herself. She didn't need to raise her voice. Because Dalton had no idea just how much power rested quietly in her hands. As the evening rolled on, the humiliation escalated in subtle waves. A spilled drink she rushed to handle was followed by Dalton's mocking comment, "At least she's good for cleaning up messes." Laughter echoed around the table. Later, when she discreetly reminded him of his speaking slot, he sneered, "Tell your boss to send someone who matters." Each jab was meant to reduce her, to erase her presence. And yet Clara held her ground. She did not respond, did not give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Every insult only drew more eyes toward them, and more discomfort among the silent majority in the room. The air grew heavy with unspoken judgment, with a curiosity about how far Dalton would take it. By the time dessert was served, the room was divided. Some whispered admiration for Clara's composure. Others mocked her silence, convinced she was powerless. Dalton, emboldened by his own cruelty, leaned closer to his audience of elites, raising his voice just enough for half the room to hear. "Staff should know their place," he declared, lifting his glass as though it were a toast. "The real decisions happen at this table, not in the hands of clipboard carriers." That was the breaking point. Gasps fluttered across the room. Clara paused, her pen mid-note. She looked at him with the same serene expression she had worn all evening. And in that moment, it was no longer just humiliation. It was a challenge. Dalton had publicly diminished her, betting that she had no recourse, no position of authority that could match his. He believed she was nothing more than the staff. But the irony was sharper than he could imagine. Clara wasn't just any staff member. She was the one person in that hall with the authority to decide whether Dalton's multimillion-dollar contract, the one he was celebrating that very evening, would be renewed, renegotiated, or canceled altogether. And the opportunity to prove him wrong was coming faster than he could see. As the speeches drew near, the chairman of the board turned to Clara, asking gently, "Is everything in order for the announcements?" His tone carried respect. Authority. Dalton froze. The room shifted. Eyes darted between Clara and the chairman. For the first time, Dalton looked directly at her, confusion flickering across his face. She smiled politely, her voice calm but steady. "Yes. Everything is ready." And with that, the stage was set. The humiliation had peaked. The stage was Dalton's playground, or so he thought. In mere moments, the challenge of his life would arrive, and the power balance of the room would turn on its head. "You saw what just happened, right?" Clara stood there, calm and composed, while Dalton tried to strip her dignity away. And yet, there's something powerful in her silence, because when someone underestimates you, they give you the perfect chance to prove them wrong. If you've ever been in Clara's shoes, ignored, belittled, treated like you don't belong, then you know exactly how it feels in this moment. And trust me, the best part of this story hasn't even started yet. So before we move into the big twist that will leave Dalton speechless, take a second to hit that subscribe button. Because here, we celebrate the underestimated, the overlooked, and the underdogs who rise up to shock the world. And you won't want to miss the moment Clara turns the tables on him. The air in the ballroom grew denser as the chairman's question hung in the air. Clara, still calm, gave her steady reply. For a brief second, the hierarchy cracked. Eyes that had dismissed her now lingered with curiosity. Dalton's smirk faltered, though only slightly. He was too arrogant to imagine what was coming. Moments later, the stage lights brightened, signaling the start of the evening's highlight, the renewal of key corporate contracts. These were not symbolic gestures, they represented millions of dollars, future partnerships, and reputations that would shape the market. Everyone leaned forward with interest. Clara moved toward the stage, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. Dalton watched her, confused. He glanced at his associates, muttering, "What is she doing up there?" A few shrugged, uneasy. She stood beside the chairman, microphone in hand. Her voice, clear and poised, carried across the hall. "Good evening. Before we begin, I'd like to thank everyone for being here tonight. As event manager, it's my duty to ensure everything runs smoothly, but tonight, I also stand in another role." Whispers rippled. Dalton frowned. Clara continued, "For the past 2 years, I've worked closely with our board to oversee the evaluation of partnerships. Some of you may not know this, but our event division also manages strategic contracts that ensure this organization grows with integrity." Dalton's glass slipped slightly in his hand. The realization dawned slowly, agonizingly. Around the room, executives sat straighter. They weren't just listening to an event manager now, they were listening to someone with influence. The staff member Dalton mocked was standing at the very center of decision-making. Dalton leaned forward, his voice sharp, whispering to his neighbor, "She's bluffing. This is some stunt." But Clara wasn't bluffing. She spoke with calm authority, outlining the purpose of the evening, contract renewals, including Dalton's. Each company would be recognized for its contributions, and the board would announce decisions about the future. Her professionalism was undeniable, her words crisp and deliberate. Then came Dalton's turn. "Next," Clara announced, glancing at her notes, "is Dalton Enterprises. Their contract has been under review due to performance inconsistencies and leadership concerns." Gasps scattered through the audience. Dalton's head snapped up, color draining from his face. He hadn't expected to be scrutinized, not here, not tonight, not by her. He rose from his chair, forcing a laugh. This is ridiculous. Who let her? But the chairman's calm voice interrupted. Please, Mr. Dalton. Let her finish. The authority in that single sentence silenced him. Dalton sat down, his jaw tight. Clara's tone never wavered. In recent months, several red flags have been raised about Dalton Enterprises. Reports of poor labor practices, missed deadlines, and a concerning disregard for collaboration have reached the board's attention. Tonight, we bring transparency to our process. Dalton shifted uncomfortably, his associates avoiding his gaze. The spotlight, once his throne, now burned hotter than ever. Every eye was on Clara. The same woman he dismissed as unworthy of his attention now held his company's future in her hands. And she wasn't done. Contracts are not just about numbers, she continued. They are about trust, respect, and accountability. We partner with companies that honor those values. Which brings us to a decision. The audience leaned in closer, breaths held, waiting for the final blow. Dalton gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. His arrogance, once his armor, was cracking. And Clara, the woman he called just staff, was about to deliver the verdict. The silence stretched. 1,000 unspoken thoughts vibrated in the air. Clara stood tall at the podium, her voice unwavering. After thorough review, she said, her eyes sweeping across the crowd before settling on Dalton, the board has decided not to renew Dalton Enterprises' contract. The words landed like thunder. Gasps echoed through the ballroom, followed by murmurs of disbelief. Dalton shot to his feet, face red with fury. You can't do this, he barked. This contract is worth hundreds of millions. I've put years into. Clara raised her hand gently, not to silence him with force, but with composure that commanded respect. It's already done. This decision was finalized before tonight. I am simply the one delivering it. Respect is not optional in this partnership, Mr. Dalton. It's the foundation. Dalton's protest crumbled into incoherent sputters. His associates sank into their chairs, avoiding eye contact, abandoning him in his most vulnerable moment. The crowd, once entertained by his arrogance, now stared with thinly veiled satisfaction. Justice was unfolding before their eyes. Then, from the back of the hall, a voice rose. One of the senior board members, a respected elder in the industry, spoke with calm conviction. Miss Clara has been instrumental in guiding our organization towards sustainable, respectful partnerships. If she says a company is unfit, we trust her judgment. The endorsement was the final nail in the coffin. Dalton staggered, his confidence shattered. He muttered under his breath, but no one listened. He was no longer the star of the evening. He was the cautionary tale. Clara closed her notes and stepped away from the microphone. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply nodded to the chairman, signaling the continuation of the program. Her humility and victory shone brighter than any triumphal gesture could have. The ballroom erupted in quiet applause. It wasn't loud, it was respectful, acknowledging the quiet strength she had shown all along. Executives who had laughed earlier now watched her with awe, some even shame. The lesson was clear: arrogance had no place where respect and integrity were the true currency. Dalton sank back into his chair, silent, defeated. His empire had been clipped in front of everyone, not by another CEO, not by a rival, but by the woman he had called just staff. The irony was unbearable. Clara walked off stage, blending once again into the hum of the event. She wasn't interested in basking in the spotlight. Her work wasn't about recognition, it was about doing what was right. And that, more than anything, is what made her unforgettable. For Dalton, the humiliation was permanent. For Clara, it was just another evening proving that true power doesn't always come dressed in arrogance and wealth. Sometimes, it walks quietly with a clipboard, waiting for the right moment to speak. The applause faded into a low murmur as the next speaker prepared to take the stage. But the energy in the ballroom had shifted forever. People weren't talking about the contracts or the strategic deals anymore. They were whispering about Clara, the woman who had just dismantled Dalton's empire with grace and precision. Dalton slumped in his chair, his tie loosened, beads of sweat rolling down his temple. For years, he had strutted into events like this one, treating every waiter, assistant, and junior partner as though they were beneath him. Tonight, his empire was not lost in a backroom negotiation or a boardroom vote. It was lost in a ballroom, in front of everyone who mattered. His humiliation was complete, and no amount of bravado could patch over the truth. His directors whispered among themselves, clearly shaken. Two of them quietly excused themselves, phones in hand, no doubt already reaching out to competitors to salvage their careers. Dalton Enterprises was toxic now, radioactive in its arrogance. Investors would run. Partners would distance themselves. And all of it stemmed from one man's inability to show respect. Clara, meanwhile, continued with the program as though nothing extraordinary had happened. She introduced the next contract, thanked the sponsors, and gave a warm nod to the catering staff who had been working tirelessly behind the scenes. Her humility wrapped the room in calm professionalism. It was as though she was reminding everyone that no matter how high the stakes, decency never had to be sacrificed. As dessert was cleared, Clara returned to the floor to ensure everything was flowing. Guests approached her quietly, one by one, to offer compliments. A CFO murmured, "You handled that with more class than I've ever seen in this industry." A young manager whispered, "You gave me hope." "Thank you." Even the chairman himself stopped by, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Clara, your leadership tonight set the standard for all of us." She smiled, nodding politely. "I was just doing my job." But everyone knew she had done much more. She had set an example that leadership doesn't require cruelty, and power doesn't excuse arrogance. Her restraint, her quiet dignity, had carried more weight than Dalton's shouting ever could. Dalton, on the other hand, couldn't escape the fallout. By the time the gala concluded, whispers had spread through every corner of the industry. His competitors grinned. Journalists scribbled notes, eager for headlines. Even those who once feared him now pitied him. He tried to leave the hall with his head high, but the silence that followed him was deafening. No one stopped him, no one shook his hand. The absence of acknowledgement was louder than any insult. In the days that followed, the consequences multiplied. Dalton Enterprises stock plummeted. Partners pulled out of joint ventures. Former employees came forward with stories of mistreatment, now emboldened by his very public downfall. Within a month, Dalton was no longer CEO. His empire crumbled, not from financial mismanagement, but from the rot of arrogance that had hollowed it out. For Clara, life did not change in the way outsiders might expect. She didn't rush to capitalize on her newfound recognition. She didn't plaster her name on headlines or bask in the glory. She returned to her office the next morning, reviewing event schedules, checking budgets, and sending thank you notes to her team. Her fulfillment wasn't in the spotlight, it was in the quiet assurance that she had done what was right. Yet, those around her saw her differently now. The staff, who had always admired her fairness, now walked a little taller, knowing they had a leader who would never let them be diminished. Executives, who once brushed past her without notice, now greeted her with genuine respect. Even the chairman invited her to contribute to broader organizational strategy, a recognition of her keen insight and steady hand. The justice was poetic. Dalton, once the loudest voice in the room, was silenced by his own hubris. Clara, once dismissed as just staff, proved that true authority comes from integrity, not ego. The boardroom and the ballroom both remembered the lesson: never underestimate the quiet ones. They often hold the most power. One evening, weeks later, Clara sat alone in her modest apartment. The city lights glittered beyond her window. Her phone buzzed with messages, offers, congratulations, invitations to high-profile panels. She skimmed them briefly, then set the phone aside. She brewed herself a cup of tea, opened a book, and exhaled with contentment. She didn't need their approval to feel whole. Her value had never depended on their recognition. It came from within, from the knowledge that respect, humility, and courage would always outshine arrogance. And that truth, more than any contract or accolade, was her quiet victory. And that's how the story of Clara reminds us that respect is never optional. Dalton thought his title made him untouchable, but in the end, it was humility and quiet strength that changed everything. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever had someone look down on you, only for you to prove them wrong? Share your story in the comments, because your experience might inspire someone else here who needs to hear it today. If you believe in the power of the underdog, if you believe kindness and integrity are stronger than arrogance, then make sure you follow this channel. Together, we're building a community that lifts up stories like Clara's, stories that remind us to never judge by appearances and to never doubt the quiet strength within ourselves. Because sometimes, the people dismissed as just staff are the very ones holding all the power.